Alrighty, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League of Inches podcast. And this team is obviously, we're doing the season reviews as always. And we're right in the thick of it now. We're in the middle part of things. And this team, probably a good thing we held off in a way because there's been a lot to discuss the last week or two regarding this team, a lot of changes. It's been a season where they definitely didn't finish where they wanted to. And that's the Brisbane Broncos. So, as I mentioned, a disappointing season. We're going to delve into that. And to help me do that, I've got Chris from Day.Sports along for this journey. And heads up, a massive Broncos fan. And in a way, was dreading this one, but he's more than happy to come on and have a bit of a chat about his team season. So, Chris, let everyone know, first of all, just a bit about your page as well. And then we can get into the Broncos side of it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me on, man. You're right. Yeah, I'm dreading this one a little bit, but sometimes you've got to talk about the things that you don't want to talk about to move past them. So here we are talking about the Broncos season. Day.Sports. So that's something that I started off at the start of this season just by myself. So you can find me on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all the social medias and all that. Pretty much just go through your general tips, predictions, all that sort of stuff. What are the topics that are going on in the world of rugby league, as well as whatever other sports, cricket, MMA, UFC, things like that. So if you enjoy any of that, make sure you get on board. But yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing, a little solo operation. So yeah, slowly but surely getting there.
I always say, make sure you go give Day.Sports some love all over the social media side of things. And appreciate all the work that Chris is doing. It's a tough slog on your own. I respect him for that. So to him quickly off air about it. But yeah, make sure you go ahead and give him some love. And you mentioned it, and I say this to all the creators who are supported teams that didn't go too well this year. This is where we basically just put a blanket over the season and just go, after this podcast, it's done, and we can just start to look forward to next year. And that's where we are for the Broncos. So this year they finished in 12th position, 26 points, 10 wins, 14 losses, and a points differential of minus 70. So obviously coming off a grand final berth where they were minutes away from holding that premiership up in a Nathan Cleary masterclass. Got Penrith home, obviously, last year. To then become, basically, it's the Penrith curse we've seen from a lot of teams so far, South Sydney, Parramatta, and now, unfortunately, the Brisbane Broncos. So I guess when we speak about the season review for the Broncos this year, we probably have to go all the way back into right at the start. But before we do that, I'll ask your initial thoughts just on the season as a whole from a supporter point of view.
It has been a roller coaster and a bit of a disappointing season. So like you touched on, we pretty much had 9 fingers on the premiership last season, if it wasn't for a certain Nathan Cleary. And I didn't realise how close we were to actually winning that until I went and rewatched it. You know, I was just in a world of my own after that game, but realising there was only about 4 minutes to go. So, you know, from going from such a high of being in the grand final last season to where we've ended up, it has been a pretty rough watch. You know, sure, we've had a lot of things go against us this season, injuries, whatever else, on-field, off-field dramas, all that. But at the end of the day, you know, we didn't quite produce, I think, what, basically everyone expected. So pretty disappointed.
Yeah, and look, I'm with you because it popped up on Fox Sports the other week, and I remember just sitting there, I was watching, I timed it basically, I flicked it on just after second half, Ezra Mam scored his third try for that hat trick, and I sort of said to myself, I'm thinking, hang on, do they lose this game? Like I'm thinking, is my memory stuffed me up here? But I'm pretty sure the Broncos lose this game, sort of thing, and not to rub it in or nothing, but just sort of, as you said, it just sort of writes into the history books, just what has happened, and then. As I said, we go into sort of what has happened this year, and it starts at the start of the year. And you always think you've got to sort of lose one to win one, and that's the modern sort of saying. We've seen that with the Rooster side of it. We've seen that with the Penrith side of it. The Storm have sort of done it as well. But then it's just, as I said, the recent history, it hasn't really worked that way. And we got to see, and look, you mentioned it on and off field. Straight away, there was an off-field incident in the off-season where it involved 2 senior players, one being obviously Adam Reynolds, the captain, and then Paddy Carrigan just had a bit too much to drink and got into a little bit of a push and shove, which wasn't the greatest look. And look, every mate out there, they've probably got a story of doing this with their own mates. So it's always blown up a lot more because of, I guess, the standards that the Broncos have as their old boys continually go on about with the club and where the Broncos hold themselves. So it wasn't a great look. But does that sort of, when you look back at it now, does that was that a warning sign to go, or are the players' minds where it should be for the season ahead?
I think looking back on it, it does kind of stand out as the starting point to where things may have fallen apart a little bit. We're never going to really know, and I'm sure that those two get along completely fine. But like you said, having two, really senior players been in the limelight for, something that's nothing really, a little bit of a push and shove that we've all done it with our mates, but we don't really need to see Renault, absolutely pumping poor Paddy out there on the streets. It's not really what we need. And, like you said, with the kind of Penrith curse, it hasn't been great. Ending last season, I was really hoping that it was that lose one. We're going to bounce back and potentially even do something like Penrith have done, but, it didn't quite eventuate like that. But, yeah, I think we just started off on the wrong foot from the get-go leading into that Vegas game.
Yeah, and I said it after the grand final. I said to the mate I was watching with, I said the Broncos are going on a bit of their own dynasty here. I just had that feeling about it. There was some really great young players coming through. Adam Reynolds had another couple of years to go with his sort of contract. It just felt like all the ingredients was there. And as you said, there's been some reasons, and we've got to get into it during this podcast. Off-field incidents. It's been a bit of noise around the injury front as well, and a couple of really key players have missed a huge chunk of the season, which definitely didn't help the Brisbane Broncos. But obviously started out Vegas. That was supposed to be a fantastic sort of venture. Everyone was so keen for it, and I felt like, in a way, being the first year, the football took a backward step, and it was more so get over there, promote the game, promote how great rugby league is, and sort of Reece Walsh in the headlines. You had that awesome pic that he was standing there, the stadium in the background and stuff. How was that for a supporter point of view? Because that would have had the excitement levels right up there after the grand final, coming into the year, thinking this could be our year. We get another premiership.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I thought we were going to start absolutely firing, especially sending a team like the Broncos over to Vegas, like you said, to promote the game. The way that they played throughout 2023, you couldn't have picked a better team, a more exciting team, really, with the way that they attacked and the players that they had, the stars, your Walsh, your Ezra, guys like that. So yeah, it was super exciting to see them over there. You expected quite a lot after the season that they just had as well. But yeah, I guess didn't quite all come together in that game. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess one thing that stood out to me when I look back at this season for the Brisbane Broncos was the start wasn't that bad. Like, it wasn't actually a horrible start in terms of the season. It was a 7-4 win to loss ratio by round 11. So it wasn't all doom and gloom. You're actually ahead and you were in the top 8 and stuff. There was that next period, which we'll talk about, which was the really bad period where there was no wins over a 6 sort of game period, plus a couple of buys thrown in there. But that initial part of the season, yes, it wasn't amazing. I guess the football wasn't amazing either, but you're getting some wins up. You were managing to beat teams that I guess at times may have been playing some better football, but just that would have kept you probably thinking and hoping, yeah, all right, let's just get coached through for now. Get to around that origin mark, get away with some injuries, and away we go.
Yeah, for sure. We weren't necessarily blowing teams away, but like you said, it was more than enough. We were getting the wins together. I actually had a look at the draw, look back on it before we jumped into this. Was like, yeah, we really did start out pretty well. Sure, might have lost that Vegas game and a few things, obviously blow up in the media around that and whatever effect that might have had on a few of the boys. But outside of that, like, we were cruising pretty well. I think, what was it, second round, went out, beat the Rabbitohs. It was a bit of a shit show at the start, but it all came together.
Yeah.
Kept being the Cowboys' dad, pumped them, so that was all sweet, and just like continued the season. And yeah, it was heading in the right direction. Getting those wins under their belt at the start of the season, and yeah, working into that Origin period. So yeah, it really wasn't such a bad start. So yeah, like you said, I'm sure we're going to get into it, but the wheels eventually started to fall off a little bit later on. But yeah, nothing wrong with the way the boys started out.
Yeah, you did, and it sort of did coordinate basically with what happened at Vegas, which you mentioned, and that was obviously the Ezra Mam incident, the racial slur that occurred with Spencer Leniu, which wasn't good to see at all. I think there was not a single fan in the game that agreed with what happened there, and obviously copped quite a harsh and severe punishment, and probably rightly so. We did not want that anywhere near the game, but let's have a quick chat about. I don't want to talk about Ezra Mam's current stuff, but let's just see Ezra Mam's season as a whole, because I feel like that obviously played a huge part in his season. Because if I'm going to be brutally honest, and I'm happy for you to come back at me here, but I don't think he had a great season. And I feel like when you look back at this now, and it's been a few weeks post the league season, and you sort of think about some of the things that did happen over this year, that's a big key point that honestly you can't really blame him, because that's obviously something that he took to heart and really took personally, that sort of attack. How did you rate the Ezra Mam season?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to come back at you and argue against it, but no, I very much kind of agree. I think it was a fairly average season. We probably don't have the most kind of reference to go off as well. He had an unreal 2023, but prior to that, only kind of played a game here and there. So we don't have this big catalogue of work to look at. Like you said, there was that incident over in Vegas, which, we're never really going to know unless, your Ezra or potentially some of his close teammates or mates, how much that actually knocked him around. I can't imagine it would have been great, and how that might have affected his footy throughout the season. Yeah, not going to know. But yeah, he didn't quite reach the highs that he did in 2023. I think different times we saw glimpses of it for sure. That explosive, fast, running six that has that X factor. We definitely saw that, but I think he, if I'm being honest, kind of went missing a little bit in a few of the games where we really did need him to stand up big time. Particularly when we, didn't have a Walsh, didn't have a Renault, guys like that, where it really was his time to shine. I just think, maybe the moment was a little bit too big, or, just couldn't quite click with the other boys. It wasn't quite his season, that's for sure. And I guess part of that, he's so young at the same time.
Yeah.
What is he, 22, 23? So, a lot of those halves, they're not going to, reach that level or experience, without going through it. So, yeah, I think we kind of saw that, after the 2023 season with Ezra. But yeah, definitely wasn't his best one, and picked up that injury towards the end that pretty much finished it all off. So lots going on at the moment, but yeah, overall for his season, yeah, probably not his
I,
best.
I think what it really showed me as well, there's been a lot of talk about him potentially moving to the halfback position, but whether that's his future, that might be the case still. But and who knows, we'll delve into that later on. But one thing it definitely showed me was he's not ready at the moment, and he really missed having either Walsh or Reynolds there by his side for a lot of that season, who takes a lot of that pressure off him. And it helped him play last year, that really great style of 5'8" sort of play that he did bring into his game, the support play, the tries, like all that sort of really dried up a lot for him this year. And that probably put a lot more pressure on him, because he had to be a lot more game organizing and that sort of kicking game and stuff, which I don't think at the moment, while he's still young, learning his craft at the NRL level, is necessarily the right sort of way. We've seen it with the Eels with Dylan Brown. They pushed him into halfback a lot of this year, and it just didn't suit him. It wasn't his style of play. So hopefully they can rectify that moving forward, the Bronx, if whatever is to happen. But we'd get to see the best, I guess, of Ezra Mam on a football field over whenever that happens. It's so much up in the air at the moment. We mentioned that that round sort of that middle period, which is around the Origin period. We always know the Broncos generally do struggle when it comes to that sort of period. So sort of between round 12 to round 19, no wins at all out of 6 games, and 2 byes thrown into that as well. So the wheels definitely fell off, and I felt like it was more extreme than normal. I feel like normally you can manage like 1 or 2, maybe 3 wins if you're lucky through that period, but to get 0 wins whatsoever, that was a really big turning point for your season.
Yeah, it was a dark, dark period, that one. And I think a lot of that, was around the time that Renault went down injured and we didn't have him for an extended period of time. So it was just a perfect storm. And, you had other players out, with injury, even Walsh, with everything that happened with him in that first Origin game. He didn't play again until the second. So you got some significant players out, and it kind of all just ties back in with the Ezra stuff as well. I agree. He's probably not ready for that 7 role or that full game management, similar to Dylan Brown. We've seen it with so many other players where it just isn't quite their style. You kind of just got to let them loose. They're kind of flashy, got a bit of flair. They're playing that structured, 7 role isn't for them at this point. But yeah, it was a bit of a weird period. Other seasons we've had those, we've had the depth where those Origin players go away, and we've got plenty of players coming through. But I think we're starting to really scrape not the bottom of the barrel. Like, we have plenty of good players, but just not like we had in other seasons. And it doesn't help when you've got a guy like Reno down that's not there to steer the ship with the experience. And there's a few other players as well. I think we really missed out on experience wise. So it was a pretty tricky part of the season, and it didn't do them any good confidence wise. Like you said, you can usually string together at least a couple, but to go on such a bad skid, you're pretty much holding out for the bye, just trying to get your hands on some points. So yeah, not a great time, that one. It was the beginning of the end almost, that little period there.
It's not ideal at all, but just from a supporters, was there much talk in the preseason about your depth in the halves, and was it ever a really big concern as of what it turned out to sort of be this year?
I don't think so. There's plenty of chatter about, I guess, the younger players that are coming through. It has probably been a question for a little bit, what's going to happen with Reno. We did see him go down at different stages last year, but I guess not as extreme as this year. I think there was quite a bit of confidence in what Ezra Mam could have done. I think that might have been part of it. And then a lot of the other players coming through, are quite young. So you've got like Kobe Black. He's one that's very much touted to be kind of the next one coming through, but a bit too young at this point, and the other boys. So no, I don't think there was a whole lot of chat about it. It just kind of all unraveled, and that's when we kind of ran into those problems. And I think in a few other positions as well, realised that either players that we've lost or players that we just don't have are a bit of an issue for us.
Yeah, 100%. And look, let's touch on the Adam Reynolds side of things. I was going to wait and just go through the season quickly and then get into some players, but we brought him up a number of times here, so let's tackle that one. I want to ask you, look, this is going to come up until he retires. Then it's going to be asked again. Obviously, everyone wants to know who's got the decision correct here, whether it's South Sydney letting him go or it's the Brisbane Broncos signing him up and having him there over the last couple of years. First of all, do you think you're getting value for money from Adam Reynolds currently? And the second part of that, do you think he is the captain of the club for at least the 2025 season?
Yeah, I think we're getting value for money. I think he was an amazing pickup. I love seeing the amount of people that give South Sydney shit when they're missing kicks from the sideline, just being like, oh, you'd really do well with a bit of a Reno right now in your team. So no, I think it was great bringing him up there. I think we have seen his experience, his leadership rub off on the rest of the boys, and, kind of open up this team. Like, we got young talent in there, but I think you need somebody like him to connect all those pieces and bring it all together. I don't think if you had him outside of that, I don't think there'd be many halves. You'd have to pick up one of your other really experienced guys, maybe your DC, your Ben Hunt, someone like that. So yeah, I think he's pretty much paid for himself, considering where we ended up last year. And as for captain, he's got to be our captain moving forward until he hangs up the boots or moves on to another team. I think he's the captain moving forward. I think it would take something, pretty hectic to happen for that to change. I don't see Madge changing that, considering they'd have some sort of relationship from back in the day. Next up, I think it's pretty obvious with Paddy Carrigan being there, but, I think he's happy to wait and, wait for that torch to be passed on. I think, Reno's the way forward. Reno don't miss. So, yeah, it's all good. Safe hands.
Yeah, look, I'm with you. I feel like the pressure on him or the outside noise talking about him, and the thing for mine is that's exactly the sort of player that the Broncos need at the moment, that senior figure in the halves directing play. It's unfortunate his body has started to fall apart somewhat. But at the same time, to replace him, you replace him with someone who's similar of age, so they've probably only got a couple of years left in them at most. So what's the point of going out to market and moving on Reynolds when it's going to be exactly the same replacement? And for mine, Adam Reynolds still is one of the best kicking games in the game. So when he's on the field, it's worth its weight in gold, in my opinion. Just the back end of this season. So sort of two games that really stood out to me was, I guess, when for me it felt like the season was on the line, and that was the back-to-back, I guess, smashings in round 21 and round 22. So at home to the Bulldogs, that was I remember the build-up to that game. That was quite a big build-up because the Bulldogs were starting to play some really good football. Everyone was starting to say that the Broncos need to win this to make sure that they can be playing finals football. It's starting to get very congested there. They need to make sure that they stay with the pack, or if not ahead of the pack. And then to come out, and it just felt like the Bulldogs just, in a way, a Serrato coaching masterclass. They all of a sudden had all this attack that no one knew existed. And the Broncos, unfortunately, didn't seem to have many answers on the day. The other one was obviously away to the Titans the next week. And that to me was definitely the game where it said, all right, if they don't win today, they don't play finals football. And it was similar. Like they just didn't seem to get out of the gates. I don't like. For me, that was very, very concerning. As a supporter, I'm guessing I know how it feels when you get to those games and you're getting pumped up, and to get there and then see that, it must have been super deflating, especially being back to back.
Yeah, those games nearly broke me. That's for sure. um, yeah, it was. You're never in a good place. I think where you're leading up to those, final couple games, and you're having to do the math whether or not you got to win X amount to make finals. So, I think you're already on the back foot when you get to that spot. But for that Doggies game, that one was a huge game. I think it was a sold out Suncorp. I remember watching at the pub with my old man and my brother. So, and I've got a mate of mine that's a Doggies fan. Like he's a diehard Doggies fan. So we were going at each other all week leading up to it, putting money on it, whatever else. So, but yeah, and then the stakes alone in that game. So they just did not seem to get out of the gate. I wasn't really necessarily that stressed about the Dogs game though. We all knew throughout the season they had this great defense. But they were really not putting that many points on the board at all. So I was kind of like, okay, yeah, like that's sweet. They might be able to defend well, but I think we're going to be able to stack some points on. We're going to have a whole, home crowd behind us and, should be okay. And then the Bulldogs came out and pretty much did the Broncos to the Broncos. Like just were throwing the ball around, ridiculous plays. Everything was coming off and pumped us. So I think it was about 10 minutes to go. Like I said, watching at the pub, my brother just pulled the pin. He's like, nah, seen enough of this. He's even more diehard Broncos fan than I am. He's like, nah, this is it. So we got out of there. But yeah, that was super disappointing. And then that just led into the next week again where you're like, okay, you've got to win this. Absolutely must come together. That game stressed me out a lot more coming into it. I think for the last few seasons, we've just always had such tight, gritty games with the Titans, and they've got a tendency to actually get it over us. So I wasn't feeling amazing.
Little brother.
Oh, they're just a little pest, eh? Like they just don't go away. We managed to get it over the Cowboys, no worries, but Titans are just they turn up big time for that. And the way that they've been playing footy for the couple of weeks, they were kind of hit and miss, but they're starting to pull things together a little bit. So it wasn't great, and yeah, they came out and absolutely smashed us. So that was pretty rough, and I think that was the game as well where we had a couple more injuries. So it was just all round bad, really. It was no good at that point, having those back to back.
And sort of that little period just sort of summed up the season in a way, and I guess how the aftermath of this season has translated as well. So yeah, it basically didn't go to plan this season at all. I want to throw to you a couple of the, I guess, reasons or rumors we've heard from, I guess, the media and what it sort of looked like to people from the outside looking in, and how the club in a way has carried itself. I want to ask you your opinion on this rock star vibe that everyone consistently talks about with this Broncos team at the moment. And it feels like they've got this aura about them when they haven't really achieved anything yet. And they're using what the past players have done and built this club up to become. And in a way, they're feeling entitled to be this sort of figure and have that ultimate respect. Did you feel like that was part of your club's identity this year?
It's kind of a tricky one with that. I feel like in a way they deserved, some of that attention that they got just based off what they achieved last season. But I think it started to become a little bit of a blessing and a curse as the season went on, and our performance wasn't quite matching that rock and roll lifestyle type of thing. On the flip side of things, like on one side, I think it's great for the guys. Obviously with the social media and the amount of fans and everything they're bringing, I'm sure that's opening up a lot of doors for them in their, in their careers, which is awesome. But at the same time, maybe it was something that started to, I don't know, maybe potentially get to players' heads a little bit. I think it was talked to the media pretty much all year. You had the open training sessions there at Red Hill, and you just have a ridiculous amount of fans there. And, that's something that I'm like, I don't know if they necessarily need that week in, week out. Like maybe keep that type of thing. This is just my personal opinion, but maybe keep that to finals. Yeah, finals, or maybe even if you want to do it first round, even, kick off the season, sweet. But I think doing that each and every, week might not have been great. But like I said, it brings a lot of people into the game. It was pretty crazy too. Like a few times, went to plenty of games this year, but game would be over, you'd go to leave, and there would be like 30 deep, lot of fans waiting to get down to the front row and stuff. Like, everyone's super keen to go, meet Reese or whoever else, Ricky, and whoever might have been there. And that was pretty weird. Like I've never seen that. Even last year, it wasn't quite like that. So yeah, they've got quite the stardom behind them now.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that was my second point I was going to actually ask you about, was this whole fans training, which honestly, I don't think there's many clubs out there that actually get a fan whatsoever at their training. They're doing most of their trainings are just literally them and that's sort of it. It would, I feel like it would be a completely different and weird vibe, because in a way you go into training and you're actually like getting a bit G'd up, you're getting pumped up because you've got this crowd sort of around you and you're just feeding that sort of energy. And I actually feel like in a way that could get exhausting the longer the season goes on, especially if the results aren't there, because you're sort of getting this G'd up feeling, but then you're looking at the ladder and you're thinking, hang on, we're sitting 14th at the moment. And I feel like I'm an absolute superstar.
Yeah, it's a bit of a unique situation for them to be in. I
Mm.
guess it's going to always be hard for us to really say what it's going to be like unless we're one of the players. But I can imagine it would get exhausting, like you're saying. Whether for starters, you're getting flogged at training week in, week out. We know all the physical stuff they put their bodies through all the time. But it'd just be, I guess, to an extent, mentally draining, I think, especially if you have like a bad training session, you had a bad loss the week before, and then you got to rock up and, they get paid a lot of money. And I guess it is all part of their gig to, be there for the fans and kind of represent the club and everything as well. But, and let alone you add on, just to use it as an example again, the stuff with Ezra Mam, where his head might have been at, for example, and then you got to go, put on a bit of a show and a dance. And I'm sure a lot of them are happy to speak with the fans, but, if you're not training well or something else and your life's wrong, and then you've got to kind of do all that, I can imagine it would get quite exhausting doing that all the time, especially when the season isn't great. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. We definitely haven't seen that with many other clubs, that's for sure.
No, unless it's grand final week and then all of a sudden everyone rocks up. Did you attend any of the training sessions? Are you able to explain a bit more what it's like, or you distance yourself from that?
Yeah, no, steer clear from that. Yeah, I can't say I'll be there trying to get Jordan Ricky's signature or anything like that. So, nah,
Get
not
on your
really for
chest.
me. Yeah, get it tattooed on me or something like that. But yeah, nah, not really for me. So, just saw the
Yeah.
videos and everything that kind of
One
come
one
along with
more,
it.
and there's two ways to look at this. It's either a legit excuse, or it's okay. The club risks signing these players on big money, and if the injuries do come, then they've got to make sure the depth is there to cover this. And I'm talking about the injuries. So I'm going to name three players that stand out to me. So Payne Haas only played 14 out of 24 games this year. Adam Reynolds only played 13 out of 24 games, and Reece Walsh 14 out of 24 games. Now, for both Payne and Reece, I think one or two may have contributed with Origin, which is fine. Obviously, Reece had that injury blow with Origin as well. But that to me, like, you can't have three of probably your best players. Give Paddy Garrett, I'll put Paddy Carrigan in there as well. But you can't lose three of your best players for at least 10 or more games in a season and expect to be right up there with the other clubs. I know people then come back and say Penrith didn't have Cleary or Storm did it without Munster for a lot of the year. Yeah, they did, but they also probably managed their club a little bit better in terms of the depth and who was there to help them fix those little errors up. And like you saw with the Storm, if Pappy was out, Suafalongo stepped up and was the man. We saw Wishart turn into an absolute 5'8" freak, and there was people questioning whether Munster would even come back to his jersey. He played that well, but what do you put that down to? Do you feel like that is, yep, definitely that's a horrible sort of terms luck in a way, and that's just sort of how it could crumble, or do you put a bit of pressure onto the club in terms of that lack of depth side of things and putting all your eggs in one basket and not paying off?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be completely honest. It's very unfortunate to have those injuries to such key players, not only, throughout the year, but just all of them happening, overlapping and happening at the same
Mm.
time. I think that was just the perfect storm, to kind of, in a way, expose, I guess, that, perceived lack of depth. I think, at the start, we probably thought we had those positions covered as well. I know when Reece went down and, had injuries and whatever else, I was pretty confident with Tristan Sailor. I thought he killed it last season, thought he had an okay, with the trials and everything. He's another one of those kind of X Factor players. I was like, yeah, sweet, we lose Reece, but we're getting something here in Tristan Sailor. And he just didn't quite have the season that I think a lot of people hoped to. I know I definitely hoped or expected from him. I think he is a quality player. I think he's just had a really, really rough time. He cops so much shit from the media, from fans, from whatever else, which I just don't think was deserved. Sure, wasn't playing his best footy. I'm sure he'll admit that and be the first to admit it, type of thing. But I think it just kind of hit his confidence. It just became a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy where he'd drop one ball and the next game he's dropping two, and then it just kept happening over and over and over. And what are you going to do? He managed to string a couple good ones towards the end of the season together. Actually, I think when Renault came back, got his confidence. But there's a fullback that you thought you probably had covered, and then with the Payne Haas stuff, you're looking at probably the best forward, or over the last few seasons, one of the best forwards you're possibly going to get. So for him to be out is massive, and I think with the loss of Flegler, that's something that ties into it as well. But at the same time, we had some guys coming through that were quite impressive. Some younger fellas, Xavier Willison, for example, is one that I thought, did a good job kind of stepping into those shoes. But, at the end of the day, it's going to be really hard to, fill those boots of Payne Haas. When you got a player that good, there's probably only 3 or 4 guys in the entire league that could, step into that type of gig. So, yeah, it was always going to be tricky. So, yeah, both injury, really unlucky. And, how many people have a backup Payne Haas laying around? So, yeah, what are you going to do?
Not many. And it's funny you mentioned, I forgot to even mention at the start of it, and I probably should have, but those losses I thought were crucial. And I remember saying it in my preview for the Broncos at the start of the year that I was a little bit concerned with them, just because I felt like all of those players that did depart the club at the end of last year actually played quite vital roles to get the club where they got to last year. And Farnworth was probably the best center in the game when he left the Broncos last year. You've mentioned Flegler and how good he was at coming off sort of the bench, playing that role and continuing just to be that basically main prop on the field, and continually either having Payne Haas or Flegler on the field was just worth its weight in gold. It was amazing. And I'd even say Palacia was really good as well. For you guys last year. So there was a couple of players there that did leave, that just, I thought, did leave a huge, huge hole, and it put a lot of pressure on the likes of your Stags, your Cobbos, and then like Payne Haas, he's human after all as well. He can't continue to just be this huge animal of a bloke week in, week out. Like it wears, and it's probably a telltale sign of the games and injuries he got this year, that maybe this is a time where the Broncos have to sit back a little bit and go, we need to come up with a bit of a slightly different plan for Payne moving forward, and make sure we help his body and Paddy Carrigan to a certain extent, because you don't want to burn either of those players out, because they're so crucial to what the Broncos are doing. And that gets me into sort of, I want to give a bit of credit here to Payne Haas, because I know he didn't play all the games this year, but the bloke, the crap, the shit that he's been going through on a personal basis for, it's felt like years now. Like, it just feels like it doesn't stop, but it feels like it was really bubbling along about the start of this year. And to continue to produce, I know he only played 14 games this year, but I still think they were 14 quality games from Payne Haas. And to say that they missed him so much shows the type of player he was. And I just want to, like, I'll put a post out, I remember at some point of the year, but I really just want to say I would give a huge credit to the bloke. I don't know how he's doing it. Like, the stuff he's going through on a personal level and continually turns up for your club. Like, you must be so proud to have him in your club.
Oh yeah, he is just an absolute weapon. Hopefully we can lock him down. Probably forever would be great, but just the mental resilience, like you said, to battle through everything that he's going through in his personal life, and has been for a considerable amount of time, and then also just the physical resilience. Like you said, he's not going to be able to be up here 24/7 every single game, year after year, the way that he plays and the way they have been playing him. He's playing with, little injuries, little niggles, or even some, more serious injuries pretty much the entire season. He was still one of the best forwards in the comp. I think as well, he just has such high expectations on him just because of how he has been going over the last few seasons. Again, maybe didn't reach those heights, but still one of the absolute best. So you cannot knock the man at all. And, the people that, say that, if he wants to look elsewhere, like he doesn't care about the Broncos and that is just, I think, pretty ridiculous. He wears his heart on his sleeve and really turns up for the club week in, week out, even if he, doesn't manage to play every single game of the year. So, yeah, nothing but props for the bloke. Like he's a absolute weapon.
I agree. Quick one for you. Would you have him ahead of either Webke or Petro in terms of rankings for Broncos props? It's a what a threesome to have. Like that is ridiculous.
Yeah, not at this point. Not at this
Yeah.
point. He's on the path, but yeah, no, you can't. I don't think you can put him ahead of those two at this point. But if he keeps going the way that he's going, yeah, he could end up being the best to ever do it. So, yeah, I think those are discussions for when he's at the end of his career.
I'll tell you what, if you're doing an all-stars team at the moment, not a bad team starting Petro and Webke and having Payne Haas coming off the bench. That is a very, very strong forward pack indeed. Another one I want to give a quick wrap to. And look, he didn't start the year well, obviously, with an off-field incident, but I thought Paddy Carrigan was huge for you boys this year. And without him, I actually think this season could have got very, very messy on the field. And it could have been almost, I know it was already embarrassing, but it could have been like ultra red face. Like it was, I thought he was huge this year for you guys.
Paddy is a freak as well. Like I don't know how his body's not falling apart at this point. Like just how hard he went every single game. He could have just about been our man of the match week in, week out. Like he just wore his heart on the sleeve and he was the heart and the soul of that team for so long throughout those bad periods, throughout everyone else being injured, especially when Payne Haas was out. He just said, boys, get on my back. Like I'm going to carry us. And yeah, he was outstanding. And he's continued that into this, the Pacific Championship. If you watched him play over the last few weeks, like he's just a weapon. Like I don't even know if he went off the other day against the Kiwis. Like he just the amount of minutes that he plays and just the way that he plays as well. But he's been outstanding. So yeah, like you said, had that brief run in with the Renault, giving him the old don't argue. But yeah, he's just been amazing.
It could have been a little shake up that he needed or a bit of a slap in the face to go, all right, I'm this sort of senior guy now in this team and I need to start acting like it and behaving like it. And honestly, after that moment, I feel like he didn't put a foot wrong and really turned into that sort of figure on the field and obviously off the field, leading with his actions as well. I guess that's sort of the last player, and it's obviously your superstar fullback, Reece Walsh, who obviously, again, didn't play as many games as he would have liked to play this year. I think in spades, like he was still that superstar, and some of the stuff he can come up with on the football field is just it's. I don't know how he does it. His vision and his speed is ridiculous. I also think there's been little bits of the season where teams have sort of found him out a little bit, and I think that might be to do with also his body and playing injured and learning to adapt his playing style to play injured because we know 98% of the gameplay injured at some point in their careers or even just season by season. But what were your thoughts on Reece Walsh this year? I know he had a lot of knockers, had a lot of doubters at certain times in this season, but also had a lot of people gasping at how good he can be on the field. And he still had some really cool, skillful moments this year.
Yeah, Reece is just a magical player to watch. I think it was definitely a little bit more up and down compared to previous season, but I still think overall he had a very decent season. I think that might have as well come down to just kind of those, 50-50s that would happen. The ball he'd throw last season, it would go through to the player, they score, he does something amazing, but this season it might have been intercepted or he's thrown it too far, whatever's kind of happened. So he just wasn't kind of getting the bounce of the ball with a lot of stuff. I think partly as well, I think he put a lot of pressure on himself to try to pull those results out of thin air for a few of those games, where you had, again, not trying to make excuses and keep touching on it, but you had those injuries or things weren't going their way or, there was games where he was almost playing, a 5/8 halfback and fullback role all in the one. Like he was just trying to do absolutely everything. And sometimes he was, you saw those games. I think, was it the Titans game, the chip and chase and the different tries that he pulled off where you're like, holy, like he is a one-man army. But, other times it didn't quite come together. I think part of that is, the amount of times teams that have spent studying him on film and trying to figure out the way he plays. I think that was the thing that hit the Broncos a little bit. I think teams, in particular, the way that Reece played and the plays with him, I think they started to nut them out a little bit, actually figure those out and
big
shut them down.
slide. Yeah.
The way that he'd come through and they'd shut him down by coming out and absolutely smashing him. So it did work, putting that pressure on. And he adapted to it throughout some of the games. He'd get smashed in one player and then he'd double pump him and get it out wide the next. But I think that played into a little bit. So that's just probably going to push him. But I think a massive thing that happened with Reece was those bad knocks that he had. Those two rough ones. He had the fractured orbital or the cheek or whatever the hell he had from Taylor May. I think that was just the first chink in the armor type of thing, and then obviously what happened with the first origin with Joseph Suaalii, that was the thing that really knocked him around a little bit. And you can't blame the fella. The way he got hit by Joseph, that is one of the worst hits that I've seen in a long time. That was brutal. Like, that knocked him around pretty bad, didn't play for some time. And I think that probably really, really shook up his confidence, especially running into the line and contact. And you've seen that with players previously, your Kalen Ponga. I know Ryan Pappenhausen, a few seasons ago, he had a long string of head knocks, and it took him a long time to get back in there. And I can't imagine psychologically what that'd be like, and whether it is something that he's worked with the sports psych with, or potentially something he might need to do to kind of get back to that peak and not being. I'm not saying he's scared of contact, but if he is at the same time, I don't blame him after his head getting rung like that. So I think that also kind of played in. I think people did notice that a little bit, that he might have been a little bit hesitant to get in there. So yeah, I think that was a massive factor as well for Reece throughout the season.
I felt like there was a number of times throughout the year, and probably rightly so, he played quite frustrated as well, which I definitely think Madge needs to sit down with him and work out in terms of dealing with the referees or teammates if they make a mistake and stuff. And just, I don't know how he wants to deal with it, because he's obviously one of those hearts on the sleeves sort of players, and we love that about him. I think he has played his best football when he's playing that hard on the sleeve style, but just working out a way for him to personally deal with some of those moments and try to have a bit of a breath in between going up to a referee or dealing with a teammate and things like that, because it's a very hard balance when you've got that sort of personality and trying to deal with that. But again, that's what you love about the bloke. So you don't want to take it away. You just need to learn to sort of deal with it in a way.
Yeah, I think he definitely needs to learn to channel that. I think there was one game he blew up at poor Corey Oates, just absolutely blew up at him. Poor Corey didn't deserve that.
Anyone but Corey, please.
Yeah, no, don't do it, Oates. Come on, man, my Pookie don't deserve that. But no, and we saw what happened last year with the incident with the ref. So it's just a matter of channeling that frustration. He's the ultimate competitor. You can tell how much it means to him. But whether it is Paddy Carrigan, who he's obviously quite tight with, telling him to keep his head on. I think Reno really helps Reece in that aspect as well. Keeping his head on and guiding him to where he needs to go. So, but that's only, again, how old's Reece? He's 21 years old. I'm sure we can all think about what we were like and imagine being in his shoes. So yeah, no, I think it'll be just something that comes with time. And, we didn't really see, I think, as bad, circumstances or blow-ups that he had maybe the year before. So, yeah, it's just one of those things.
And the thing is, like, at his age and what he has to deal with on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, I think majority of the time he handles himself very, very well for what is getting thrown at him on a constant basis. So I think, there's a couple of negatives definitely when it comes to Reece Walsh, but I think the positives far, far outweigh the negatives, that no one ever wants to talk about the positive side of the game. Unfortunately, it doesn't sell papers, it doesn't get clicks. So he's a superstar, and I've heard multiple times where he'll stay around signing things for an hour or so, and he just goes out of his way, kids and stuff. He'll do it all. So credit to a bloke who's still very young, still probably learning a lot about himself, and even going through his own sort of personal stuff that has been going on in the background that probably a lot of people would continue to forget about. So I think a huge credit to him. I want to talk about one of the big moments of the season that happened post-season. That was obviously the sacking of Kevin Walters. Now, what are your thoughts around it? Was it done a good time? Was it the right decision? What are your thoughts around it?
Oh, it's a bit of a flip of a coin, I feel. You know, it's probably not the best look, I'd say, because the club so strongly came out after the season and went, nah, Kevy, he's going to be there next season. He's going to be the coach, and, really got on the front foot and kind of then backpedaled on it. It came out of nowhere, though. Like, it really took me off guard for him to get sacked. And I guess the Broncos said he stood down. So, a really nice way to say he left. But yeah, whether it's the right decision, I think it's the right time in a way, though. I don't think it's something that we needed after the season that we just had, to deal with 8-10 weeks into 2025. I think that would have derailed us even more. Might have been better to kind of get the fresh slate, but at the same time, like, I was kind of expecting him to be given those amount of games to prove it. So yeah, it kind of goes all over the place. It's an interesting call. Whether or not they handled it the best way, yeah, don't know. I think it was pretty tough for Kevy. I think he ultimately has done a relatively good job to pull this team back together. I kind of compare it to I don't know if you follow cricket at all, but after everything that happened with the Australian cricket team a few years ago with the sandpaper and everything. So they were just in shambles, and they got Justin Langer in, who just bleeds for the Australian cricket team. And I think that's, very similar with what they got with Kevy. He's Mr. Bronco. Like, you're not going to get a guy more passionate about the club. And I think he kind of brought everything back together after, the spoon and everything that happened there. So, considering after a grand final year for him to get a boot, pretty rough, but we're here now, I guess. So just got to kind of move forward and see what Madge has got cooking up over there at Red Hill.
He's very much a victim of a results-based business, which we continue to hear, especially when it suits either club or player manager to use. I feel like, in a way, from my point of view, missing 3 out of 4 final series for a club like the Broncos is never going to sit well, whether it's with supporters, whether it's with club management, whether it's with players, whoever. I just don't think that's a good look. And I think that was probably what was the final nail, and the fact that they probably had to act quickly on Madge in terms of getting him now, because I think if it was round 6, 7, 8 by next year, he's already done a lot of work for the New South Wales camp. He probably would have said respectfully, no, I want to go into the New South Wales camp. And I feel like from probably early this year, Madge has been the Broncos guy. For a while in the background, they're probably thinking to themselves, "Oh, if Kevy doesn't go too well here, Madge is sort of our man," which is a funny one, because I've heard a lot of people talk about the old players were very vocal with getting Kevy Walters to the club and getting him that sort of position and throwing their weight of support behind him. Obviously, we know the likes of Gordon Tallis has been very disappointed by what has happened. It's funny because he's now a Titans ambassador or whatever, and seems to just want to be involved with the club when it suits. But that's a totally different argument in itself. But I just find it so funny. But it's interesting because it feels like, in a way, this is the club going, all right, we've done the passionate one. We've done the guy that bleeds for the club. Now we're going to put a big time coach in here, and let's see what we can produce. And this is a huge moment, I feel like, for your club, for the CEO, for the club owners and stuff who have made this decision, have basically stabbed their own son in a way and then gone, thank you, but no thank you. Let's move on, and put a guy that has been hated by a lot of Queenslanders just a little under, 5 months ago now. So it's a huge decision, and we're going to see quickly if Madge is the right man. Do you think he is the right man?
Oh, it's hard to tell how he's going to bring all those personalities together and kind of see his vision. I think Madge has been in the past painted as a bit of a madman when it comes to coaching, somebody that definitely has his own style, and whether that's going to hold up with some of the younger players, it's going to be a little bit hard to tell. I guess it depends as well what the helping hands that he's got coming in. So he's got those new assistant coaches. I think that are going to be very handy connecting with some of those players. But from what I've heard, so like you said, yeah, we weren't too fond of Madge not too long ago after what he did to us in the Origin series. But at the same time, with that, what he managed to achieve, and with the Kiwis, it is pretty promising. You like that, somebody that can get a hold of these teams and produce outcomes in a short time frame. and I think at this point, with the team that we do have, he's got all the pieces to really build towards something, whether it is next season or the season after. But you hear different players talk about what he was like in the New South Wales Origin camp and everything, and it sounds like he really is good at bringing them all together. And a lot of them rated him very highly. I think Zach Lomax was quite vocal about it. So yeah, will be interesting. He was the first pick for me, but I just didn't think it would actually happen. I thought he was pretty content with the New South Wales stuff. It was kind of like, oh yeah, Madge would be great, but it was a lot better idea than Trent Barrett. That's for sure. So, I was having nightmares. I was like, "Fuck, don't!" I swear to God. But I was like, "Oh, if Wayne's available," but no, I think Madge will be all right.
Yeah, no, I think. Look, I have to quickly ask you because you're laughing when I mentioned the Tallis situation, and I feel like you supporters getting a little bit over it.
Yeah, I don't know. The Broncos old boys, they very much had their fingerprints all over the club, and I think the club and the players very much need to remember, who came before them and who laid the groundwork for them to kind of be where they are now. But I feel like they need to take their hands off the wheel a little bit. And they've got to let the club develop and the players develop into whatever they might be turning into. They need to keep that culture and tradition there to an extent, but things do change. But yeah, I was just laughing because I think it was during that second game of the season where they got flogged by the Titans. I'm pretty sure the camera cut to Gordy up in like the Titans box or something like that. I was just like, this is a bit weird, but it is what it is.
I think it was just it was handled a bit childishly because we obviously seen the comments where Tallis was trying to, was in a way proudly say that Madge offered to go meet up with him for a coffee and have a bit of a chat and obviously ice things out a little bit and cool things down. And obviously knowing Kevin Walters and him are probably best mates or very close to it. And his sort of reaction to it, like, oh, I don't drink coffee, blah, blah. I just thought like kind of like that, just handle yourself a bit better. If you're saying you're an old boy and you want the best thing for the club, like when you just end up meeting up, have an hour chat and just smooth things over, it just, I don't know why he was going that direction with it. It just didn't seem like it needed to be done. And that's why I keep saying this is a huge moment now in this. It's like a line in the sand moment for this club to go. We've relied so much on our past and our past success. We've got to change a bit now. And as you said, not continually go off the past, what the club has achieved and go from that. The last one I want to ask you about, obviously, we're talking about in a way Ezra Mam and what has currently happened and where he's at, where the club's at, where the youth supporters are at with him. I remember messaging you last week and start to get you on the podcast, and you didn't seem too impressed about what was going on. You're like, here we go. Where are you at with it all? Where are you at with this Ezra Mam situation?
I'm pulled about 19 different directions with it. It's just such a tricky situation. You try, like, from a fan's perspective, you want Ezra in your team. He's an amazing player, but it's pretty serious with what's happened. We're not going to know the full extent of it until we get, the test back and he goes through the legal system, this, that, and everything else. The Broncos have even, I think, to an extent, kind of distanced themselves from it as well until that's kind of all figured out first. It's just a shit show. Players make mistakes, people make mistakes. He's young, this, that, and everything, but it was pretty bad. Seeing the footage of it, the actual crash was, you see photos of the wreck, and it's pretty serious. And he drives a fucking massive ute as well, which doesn't help.
Kids involved, family,
kids involved, and like don't get me wrong, it's bad when anyone gets injured. But yeah, like a 4-year-old girl, I think it's like a fractured hip or whatever. So you can imagine, what that family's going through, the Uber driver and everything else involved with it. It's just, he's got the world at his fingertips, and it just seems to be it's falling through his fingers now. So yeah, I guess I'm disappointed. But I think it was Vossi on like SEN or whatever it might have been, just kind of, and a lot of people have touched on it, if it was your family kind of that had happened to you, how you'd feel about it. And, obviously you'd be fucking fuming about it. So, you kind of got to go at it from that perspective. I think he's going to be really lucky to keep his contract. For a little bit there, I was starting to think, I was like, I think Madge, from the way that he was talking, sounded like he wasn't going to sack him, or the club wasn't going to sack him. But just with the way Madge has been portrayed and, from what we've all seen and heard, I think he's really got to draw a line in the sand here. I think if he doesn't take serious action towards it, it kind of in a way not condones it, but you know what I mean? Like kind of gives that pass, to, you guys can do something as bad as this and you're still going to play footy. So yeah, we could be, and then God knows what's going to happen on the legal side of things as well. It could be it could be far more serious than that. So, it's
Well,
just it's show.
we can't really talk about the charge and stuff, but we've all seen the rap sheet, and obviously it feels like it does carry quite a serious punishment. And in terms of it might even be like something as serious as locked away for a certain period of time. We don't know yet. Obviously, that's all going through. So we're talking about that contract.
All alleged.
All alleged and everything. But we're talking just about a footy contract. It could also be much more serious for Ezra, I guess, on a personal sense. But I get a bit annoyed because I feel like in these situations, obviously, you need to let things happen. The Broncos, in a way, have their hands tied behind their back, because if they let go of him now and say we don't condone anything that you've done, which they probably don't, but they just can't come out at the moment while everything's happening and be very harsh on their punishments, another club will come and sign him up straight away. The NRL needs to come out here, and whatever ends up happening, if it is indeed the contract's ripped up, the NRL needs to get behind the Broncos in this situation and back them up and say no club is to touch him for a 12-month period, an 18-month, whatever it's going to be. No club is to touch Ezra Mam until he's fixed himself up, the suspension's been served, because we're just not teaching any of these players, whether it's a Broncos player or whoever. I don't think we're punishing him in a way. If they can just, like Ado Carr, for instance, now, like the Dogs are going to release him and get rid of him, he's just going to go sign with someone else. I don't know how that sort of sends any messages. Like, in a way, it just feels like the Broncos lose, where they had no control over the situation. They just lost one of their best players, one of the guys that they've put their future into, and you've left with nothing.
Yeah, it's lose-lose, like you said, for the Broncos. It is a very tricky situation. And I think, you're right. The NRL needs to kind of come through, bring the hammer down and, really set the precedence for these players that, you can't be doing these things. I'm sure, it's not like Ezra wants to probably go to another club anyway, but I guess, there is going to be a club, like the Roosters that has $1 billion in their salary cap that are just going to throw them, whatever they want and kind of move on with it all. I think if you stop them playing for, like you said, a year or however long, it is going to really, I think start to sink in and, hopefully, help some of these players avoid these situations. It's not going to stop everything. Everyone does some stupid shit sometimes, but you look at some of the serious bans that you've seen over the years. Bronson Jury, even, what did he get? 4 years for performance enhancing drugs, and sure, you cheated the game, whatever else. There's a lot to go along with that, but where do you weigh that in comparison to something like this? It's you got to do something about it, I think. So, it would be nice if NRL does come out, support the Broncos in that situation, just because it just ends up being just terrible for them, really.
Yeah, it makes you think, what does the NRL think's the worst look for the game? A head-high tackle, the Suoliti hit on Walsh, or this sort of incident? And I think everyone listening can agree what incident looks worse and what feels like should occur, the harshest penalty possible. Let's finish with a couple of rapid-fire questions with you, Chris. I really appreciate your time, and we did know that it was going to be a bigger episode with plenty to talk about. Hopefully we've covered everything that we could have for this season. What was your key moment for this year?
Unfortunately, it is a negative one, and we have gone over it many, many times. And I think that was the injury to Renault and the time that he spent on the sideline. I think we saw the impact that he had, and mixed with the Origin period, it was just a disaster.
Yeah, I've locked in the round 21 smashing at home to the Dogs. I know it was a bit later in the year. Just the fact that there was still hope to play finals, and everyone still in the back of their mind were thinking, we don't want the Broncos in finals football because they're one of those teams that can finish 8th and probably go on and win the comp. It was scaring the shit out of a lot of people out there. Not me, because my team had no hope of playing finals, but a lot of those top 8 teams were very, very scared. So just to have that, I know that with the injuries and stuff, it didn't help, but just to have that get there and have that sort of performance, I just didn't think was great at all. And that sort of, for me, was, I guess, the key moment of the year. Well, who was your surprise packet of the year?
I kind of have two, not going to lie. I think Xavier Willinson, I think he had a great year. When he got a chance to play, he just went out there and looked amazing. I remember seeing him in the Māori All-Stars game. Like, he stood head and shoulders, I think, one of the best players out there. Just amazing. So I think he's, had a bit of a breakthrough season. And I think as well, Blake Moser, actually, for the handful of games he got to play towards the back end of it, we got to see what he's capable of. And I think very much he's going to be the future moving forward. So those were some shining lights, and I'd like to definitely say Corey Jensen as well. So that's another one that I think just did the damn thing.
Yeah, I locked in Xavier Wilson. I am so big on this guy. I cannot wait to see the next couple of years. And we talk about needing to help the likes of Carrigan and Haas and that sort of lessen their workload. I think this guy could really come in and be a huge point of difference. And you haven't even spoken about Ben Takura and stuff like that as well, who are coming through and are just looking like they're ready to hit the ground running over the next year or two. Who needs a big 2025?
Oh, I think the whole club at this point needs it. But again, I'm flogging a dead horse here. But I think he needs a big season, but not necessarily. Well, performance-wise, sure. But I think body-wise, again, I'm going to go with Renault. I think he needs to just be available. I think it's what Scope and Willie Mason that always go on, that the best ability is availability. And I think that's definitely the case for Renault. He needs to be able to lead that team around. I think he needs a big 2025 to bounce back.
Yeah, I've maybe harshly. I've actually locked in Reece Walsh for this one. We probably both agreed it wasn't the best year for him when he was on the field and started to get a bit found out by some clubs. And I think to be that superstar player, and we've seen that from our top quality players out there, when they do start to figure out, you need to make sure you get to that next level and work out ways to adapt to your game and style to counteract that. So I think this is a huge year for Reece to do that, whether that's going to be without Ezra Mam as well and have an added bit of pressure for him and Reynolds and the like. I'm really looking forward to seeing what sort of Reece Walsh we get next year. He's obviously got the big superstar status now. He's got everyone chasing him, both women, men, everything. So we've got clubs chasing him as well. He's got it all. So I'm really keen to see him and how he reacts next year with Michael Maguire there as coach as well. Who is your player of the year?
I was tossing up actually between Paddy Carrigan, but for me, it was Corey Jensen. I think he had an outstanding season. I think he had some really big shoes to fill with Flegler moving on, and I guess with Payne Haas being out for considerable amount of the season as well. It was a bit of a silent achiever. He wasn't the super flashy guy. He's not doing anything too ridiculous, but he was just putting in big shifts week in, week out in the middle. He was just so solid, consistent. He got through so many tackles. He was a tackle machine and just got a lot of meters. So I think he did a lot of the work that went unnoticed and, didn't complain about it and just, went out and just performed well all the time. So, yeah, it'd be easy to say Carrigan, but, yeah, I think, real silent achiever and, player of the year for me would be Corey.
I'm going the easy option. I have to go Paddy Carrigan, especially after what happened at the start of the year to then turn things around when people were trying to say there was issues for him and needed to get some help, blah, 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 to turn that around and become who he did on that field. And as we said, like there was games where the Broncos were just getting smashed or something through the middle and he was trying to do it himself. It was a pretty incredible year by Paddy Carrigan, and he hasn't stopped. He's still going for the Aussies as we speak at the moment. So great year for him. That's it, Chris. Please, once again, let everyone know how to find yourself at day.sports and give it a quick plug.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. It's been great to have a chat. It's a little bit talking about the Broncos season, but like you said, we need to talk about it and then forget about it and move on. But you can find all my social media. So I'm on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook as well. I don't post as much on there, and everywhere you listen to your podcast. So go suss those out, like, subscribe, all that sort of jazz, and that'd be greatly appreciated.
As always, the League of Interest community, please get around him, give him some love. Go and watch the videos, love it. Go everything you need to do, the social media language, please go and do. Chris, thank you once again for jumping on. I know it wasn't an easy season to discuss, but you came on and got it done and spoke really, really well of your Broncos. Good luck in 2025. Hopefully it's a bounce back year for the Brisbane Broncos.